Hello and welcome to the third episode in our ArubaOS-CX switching series, where we start discussing how to configure the ports and interfaces on these switches, which are the 6300 series running the OS-CX firmware. In my experience, they're very straightforward and easy to configure, and we'll go through some pretty simple configs just to get you up and running and show you how it's done. So if I then check devices so I can see which COM port I'm plugged into with the switch, and if you're not familiar with how to connect to these switches, I do have another video in the series which I'll get linked below for you to go back and check that. So we have COM port 3 there, so if I open up a terminal program such as PuTTY, so let me just pop up Device Manager just to see what COM port we are connected to on our switch. And if you're not familiar with how to connect to these switches using, well, you can use your phone, which is quite strange. I will link the video in below where I talk you through all the ways you can connect to them. So as you can see here, we are on COM port 3. So if I open up PuTTY or Terminal Manager of your choice, PuTTY is always the universally used one. So COM port 3, and the speed is 115200. There we can see we're connected to the switch. This is a lab, so the login is admin with no password. Perfect. So now we're logged in. We will just double check if there's any config on you. So if we do a show run, you can see there's nothing on you. It's the default configuration for these Aruba switches. So let's look at configuring an interface then. So if we do like we did previously, a show run, you can see all the interfaces are labeled there. We've got ports 1 to 52, all configured as interfaces. We also have a VLAN 1 interface. And if you have a look, we got VLAN 1 and 20 configured on the switch. That's just for some testing that we were doing. So you have to label what the VLAN is, and then if you want it to be a layer 3 interface, you then configure it as an interface. So if we then try and configure one, or we'll just see a simple command that will show you the configuration without having to run through it all. So if we do show run and then interface, and as you can see, they are labeled as 1152, 1151, 1150. This will change if they're stacked. It'll be, for example, 2150, or certain modules will add more ports. So it's always good to do that. You can do show run interface 111, for example, and it will show you all the configuration. So on here we've set up, for example, spanning tree for BPDU guards, we've got loop guard, we've got TCN guard, we've got loop protect. And if we have a look at the default config, so interface 2, it's simple as it gets. No shutdown, no routing. It's a layer 3 switch, so you have to tell it no routing if you want it to be a layer 2 interface. And it's in the default VLAN, which is VLAN 1. So if we go through, then you can do a show int brief, which will show you all of the interfaces. It'll show you this native VLAN, because you can have trunk ports on you, which will give you more than one VLAN on the port, as long as they're tagged. And yeah, you can see if it's enabled. It's down because there's nothing plugged into it, but it is allowed to be up because it is enabled. So if we try and configure an interface, we're already in config mode, but I'll show you. So configure, gets you into global config mode, and then you select your interface. So we'll do 111. Now when you're in here, if you did try and do a show command of sorts, if we did, so show run and config interface 111, it worked. Doesn't usually work. Anyway, we're in the interface, so as you can see, the run and config is there. If you do just a show interface, doesn't show you the configuration. There are little hints in there. So admin state is up, for example. You can do 5 because these are capable of 5 gigabit. So you can see the speed is full duplex. There's no quad configuration on you, so that's not an issue. And yeah, it's in VLAN 1. Any packet errors you can see there. As you can see, nothing's really gone through it. So if we then want to add or remove config, so we'll do a show run on there again. Press up to go back to your old ones. We've got show run interface, and we have, for example, spanning tree. So if we do no spanning tree, BPDU guard, and we do a show run again, as you can see, it just removes it. So to take something away, it's a no. To add something, just type it in. So we can add it again, spanning tree, BPDU guard, BPDU guard, and it's in. So if we show, there you go, it's all in there. Now, the most common thing you're going to do is be changing what VLAN they're in. So, for example, this one's in VLAN access 1. If you wanted to add more than one VLAN trunk allowed, and then you can do 1. And we've only got 2 on here, so 1 and 20. And then if I do a show run now, you'll be able to see the native is 1 because I didn't designate one, so it'll be the default that's on there. And then VLAN trunk allowed, it shows as 1 and 20. Now, the most common thing to do now would be probably, because it is a layer 3 switch, is to set up a SVI, which is a switched virtual interface. And that will allow you to, for example, set up DHCP, and you can put your interface into that VLAN and it will assign it an IP address to save you messing around. So let's move on to that. So if we continue now and just configure a SVI. So let's do a show VLAN. Sorry, let me move out of this. So we're in the normal mode, the base layer. So if I do show VLAN, we've got VLAN 20, which doesn't even have a name, and we've got the default VLAN 1. So if we do configure, we do VLAN 80. Why not? So now we're configuring the VLAN. So if we do a name, and we'll call this SVI DHCP, just so I know what it's for. So we do exit there, and if we do show VLAN again, we now have VLAN 80, which is set up there, SVI DHCP. I know it's kind of contradictory to name it that, but that's fine, we'll move on now. So if we do configure, and then if we do an interface VLAN 80, this is where you start configuring the interface, and we'll give it an IP address range of 10.10.10.1. We'll do .0 /24. Is it 255? 255.0. So let's then configure the SVI. So if we do configure and then interface VLAN 80, we're now into the configuration of the SVI. So we'll set an IP address. We'll do 10.10.10.10. Sorry, we'll do .1 /24, which is pretty much the go-to, which I think everyone uses. Gives you 254 addresses. So now we have an IP address in there. If we wanted to set up a DHCP server, for example, so we'll do an IP helper address, and then let's, for example, say it's at 10.10.10.10.254. And then if we exit that and we do show interface brief, we have now the interface VLAN 80 listed in there. Sorry about that, the camera stopped recording. So I was just going through the configuration for the SVI. So if we do show interface VLAN 80, interesting. things going on here. Let's do a show VLAN. So we've got VLAN 80 there, which is the SPI DHCP. And if we do show run, then we can see here we've got VLAN 80 with an IP address of 10.10.10.1, and then the IP helper address is just pointing to a DHCP server, which doesn't exist, so I can't test that out for you right now. But yeah, that's the basics of it. You can also do other routing on here because it is layer 3 like OSPF, BGP, and you can even enable VRFs, which will probably be my next video. So let's take a look at what we've done today. So let's just go over what we've done today. We do show run. We've set up an SVI, a layer 3 interface for VLAN 80, which if, for example, we added the port 1 from earlier, so if we do, we're in configure, we interface 111, we can do show run interface to see what we've got at the moment. So we've got a trunk in there. If we wanted to, we could add VLAN access 80, and then if we do a show run again, it's now changed to an access port on VLAN 80. Now, if the DHCP server is set up correctly, what that'll do is once something's plugged into this interface, it will give it an IP address in the range that is shown there. So if we do show run again, so it will be within the 10.10.10.1/24 range. So yeah, it's pretty simple. That makes it a lot easier if you're configuring interfaces, because for example, if I have to go through every interface, assign it an IP address myself, I'm going to lose my mind. But if you just add VLAN access 80 to all the ports that you want within that range and within that VLAN, then you're all good. Well, you're all good and you're all golden. So let us wrap that up for today. If you do have any questions or any comments that you'd like to leave below, please carry on and do so. We'll try and get back to you as soon as possible, but we do unfortunately have real jobs to do. Yeah, so if you enjoyed it, if you want any more, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.